Happy Thursday, everybody. We are about, 100 minutes from kickoff of the 2023 season as we go live here on Thursday night. But we are still talking about our game that we are focusing on Sunday. The Cincinnati Bengals travel to Cleveland to face off against the Cleveland Browns in a huge matchup to kick off the season. I'm Anthony Cosenza. He's John Sheeran. As if you haven't gotten enough of us already, John, we've got a special guest to help us break down this game a little further after our conversation yesterday.
Game one, guest number one. We need insight on this Cleveland Browns team. There's been a lot of changes that they've made. Some things remain the same on both sides of the ball, but we need an update, and we're going to bring in someone to help us out.
All right, we are bringing in Tom Moore from the SB Nation site, the SB Nation's Cleveland Browns site, Dawgs by Nature. And you can go over there, catch not only what's going on with the Cleveland Browns there, but their podcasts, as well as 5 questions with the enemies that I partook in this week. So a little shameless self-promotion there. But Tom, how are you? Good to have you on the show.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Excited here. Week 1. We're ready to go. I'm trying to decide how heavy I want to go here, or if I should kind of ease into this a little bit. I mean,
well, we didn't do you any favors. I guess we should have probably been good hosts and told you that we were going to do a live show instead of a
that's
pre-recording.
my fault for not asking.
But hey, we're gonna have some fun and break
Always.
this down for just a little bit here. Before we get going, if you wouldn't mind, give the people a little bit of your background in terms of covering the Browns, working at Dawgs by Nature, and everything else.
Oh, sure. Been a Browns fan for mid to late 70s.
Wow.
So I go back to Brian Seib cardiac kid days, the glory days of Bernie in the mid 80s. Survived everything imaginable. This team gives fans so many things they can never unsee, and they always surprise you. And generally, it's not in a good way. But we're still here. It's a new season. Everything is always positive when you're heading into week 1. So I've been at DBN since summer of 2018. So
okay.
We're coming up on 5 years now. Been on and off in the Cleveland blog community probably like for a decade or so. At various sites. We just landed focusing on the Browns. I mean, it's Cleveland. It's football town. The Guardians exist just to get us to training camp, and the Cavs are around to fill in the gap between the end of the season and the draft. And I'm probably going to get hammered for saying both of those things, but we only can speak the truth. What are you going to do?
That's right. Well, happy to have you with us. I guess first things first, and John and I will just kind of volley some questions back and forth at you here. But first things first, give us an update, if you could, on the health of the Browns heading into this week and how things are looking. I saw that Denzel Ward, the great corner, has had limited participation the past couple of days because he's dealing with that concussion issue. And then there's some others who have kind of been out. But I think overall it's a relatively healthy Cleveland team at this point, correct?
Yeah, everything, for the most part, everything looks good on offense. I'm just going to go through real quick here through the injury report. Ward has been back. He's still in concussion protocol, but at least he came back and was able to practice on a limited basis this week. The big news today was safety Juan Thornhill, their big free agent signing, came up with a calf injury, so he did not practice. You guys are familiar with the calf injury, as I'm sure. So that was probably the most, the biggest unsettling news, that come out today. So other than that, guys, veteran rest days, which are to be expected, but none of the big guys, outside of a few guys on offense with a handful of series, played much in the preseason. So everybody should be fresh. Everybody should be ready to go. Best thing, opening with a division opponent. The downside is somebody's going to walk out of there 0-1 in a division. The upside is there should be no surprises. You've had all summer to prepare for a team that intimately. So, and that goes, true on both sides of the ball. So should be ready, come Sunday.
That's an interesting segue to what I'm most curious about in this game, considering that the Browns offense now has a quarterback that has been with the system for over a year now. He's had a full offseason, a full training camp. I'm really curious as to how the Browns offense is going to evolve now with Deshaun Watson's fully integrated. Do you expect not necessarily wholesale changes, but maybe more of a pass-centric focus, at least to start the season? Or like how much different should we expect the Browns offense to look now with Watson fully integrated, I guess?
They've been talking all summer about how it's going to look different. The hope, the hope is that Watson goes back to being the Watson he was in Houston. Last year, his struggles were not. It was probably a little surprising he struggled as much as he did, but it wasn't surprising that he struggled after not playing for so long. But full off season, full training camp, full immersion into the offense. So they should definitely, as far as like pass run, play calling, you got to play to his strengths. So they'll look somewhat different, but at the core, they still do what they do. And if you look back last year, for the first 7, 8, 9 weeks of the season, even though the record didn't reflect it, even with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, the offense was humming along, being efficient, getting the job done. So now you just hope that Watson's going to be able to take it to that next level. And some weeks that's probably going to mean, we're going to have to pass, more than we want to run. Some weeks it's going to be, let's rely on the run game. I think best case scenario, or what everybody is probably hoping for, is the offense does enough through those first 3 quarters that fourth quarter rolls around. They've built that lead. You just feed Nick Chubb throughout the fourth quarter, let the defense take over, and everybody goes home happy. But I think week to week, you're going to see, obviously a different game plan, but that's that's pretty much, status quo for all the teams. But I think, you'll definitely hopefully see a more dynamic, probably a little bit more downfield, a little bit more explosive. Njoku's is supposed to be a nightmare matchup at tight end. You got another second season of Amari Cooper. You got Donovan Peoples-Jones growing a little bit more. You added Elijah Moore. You got a top offensive line. Really, the only big question mark is at quarterback, and unfortunately, that's the most important position on the field when it comes to the offense.
Yeah, talking with Tom Moore from SB Nation's dogsbynature.com. You can find him on Twitter at Tom_RedRight88. One of the weird things to come recently with the Cleveland Browns, and you mentioned kind of question marks. Well, to me, one of the question marks, whether it was a question mark that has gotten settled or it still remains one, is the kicking situation. Right before the season started, what was it, Cade York, right?
Yes.
A guy that they had drafted and a guy that they seemingly liked, but just struggled. And they moved on pretty quickly from him and actually traded for Dustin Hopkins, I believe, from, was it the Chargers? Yeah.
Chargers.
So I guess, in a game, we talk about week one. Well, week one tends to be sloppy. Sometimes the offense isn't clicking on full cylinders for either one of these teams. That could be the case. So kicking is going to be probably, an important facet of this game. So how confident are the Browns and I guess the fan base at this point in their kicking situation with that last minute switch up?
I would say on the fan side, it's one of those situations where a large majority of them are like, anybody's better than what we had. It's just York, I don't know. He's got talent. He had no problem in practice, but for some reason, I just think he got into his own head when it came to actually kicking in a game. He was, rather than trying to be natural, I think he overthought everything. Everybody always talked about how he's a perfectionist. So it obviously was not working. And if you're going to make a move, I guess, you pick up a veteran. Hopkins has been around for 9 years. He's only kicked once at Cleveland Stadium, and it wasn't in a bad weather game. So that's going to be a question mark. until he does it. You just don't know what's going to happen but the weather's going to be nice on Sunday. Hopefully it doesn't come down to it, but the guy's hung around for 9 years. You have to hope he knows what he's doing. And, you could be as confident as possible without having actually seen someone out there in game action and, do what he has to do. But if he struggles, it's going to get ugly if he struggles on Sunday, because people are already, they were already fired up about the kicking situation. And if things go sour quickly on Sunday, it's going to get bad.
It's very interesting considering 3 years prior to this, the Browns drafted Austin Seibert, and then they released him after a year. And then the Bengals picked him up, Bengals legend Austin Seibert, after their whole Randy Bullock situation. Drafting kickers is very hit or miss, and I think the Bengals fans can easily understand that. On the other side of the ball, though, with defense, the whole offseason story has been revolved around, rebuilding that defensive line, specifically the interior, right? You recently had Shelby Harris join the team. You signed Dalvin Tomlinson to a big deal at nose tackle. On a scale of like 1 to 10, what is the confidence level right now just being able to stop the run, which is something the Browns unfortunately couldn't do last year?
I'm going to say it's similar to the kicker situation where it's like it can't get any worse than it was. So it's got to be better. But it's not only the guys they brought in, but it's bringing in Jim Schwartz as defensive coordinator. Defensive line is what he's known for. You now have at least what you're hoping is at least a competent defensive interior. And by competent, basically like league average or maybe like close to league average. But then outside of that, you now have Myles Garrett, who is the best defensive end in the NFL. I don't care what anybody says about anybody else. He's now been paired with Zadarius Smith and I'm not going to say Agbo. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name because I'm going to screw it up. He now has the best set of defensive ends opposite him. So Garrett's already a nightmare. Now the offensive lines are going to have to figure out what to do with the other end, and these guys can switch around and move inside. So there's going to be a lot of pieces that Schwartz is going to be able to do. So you already have a guy who's at the top of his game at one defensive end. You have a very solid defensive end group. You have a group in the middle that hopefully can be good enough. And once you mix them all together, they should be really strong. And the good thing is, as great as it is, as much as I would love, even though it's an offensive league, having a dominant defense or whatever passes as a dominant defense in today's NFL that goes out there and really just kicks the offense around the field, it would be really cool. All the Browns, if the offense plays the way it should be able to, the way it's capable of playing, they just need this defense to be league average and they should be fine. Because you got a solid back. I'm sorry.
No,
you got a solid back end. You got a few question marks at linebacker, but you should see a lot of improvement from the defensive line. And it's like everybody, you follow this game, everybody knows if you can pressure the quarterback with only having to rush 4 guys, that makes everything so much easier, in pass coverage with everybody else, especially when you're going up against an offense like Cincinnati's.
So when sticking on the defensive side of the ball, I've got kind of a 2-pronged question for you. Number one, do you expect, because Myles Garrett, he's had success against a lot of offensive tackles around the league, but he has had a good amount of success against Jonah Williams. Do you expect him to kind of move around on each side, on each end piece? Are they going to move things around that way and match him up against Jonah Williams to continue to try and get that matchup? And or how is the Cleveland run defense? How has it improved? Because they had some issues last year against the run, and that might be, as we mentioned before, week 1, teams are kind of trying to ramp things up and find rhythms and that sort of thing. That might be where the Bengals, as explosive as they are in the passing game, they may want to try and at least keep things manageable with run, controlled passing, run game, that sort of thing early on.
Yeah, they're going to move Garrett. They've always moved Garrett around. I mean, that was the big issue that JV and Clowney had last year. He couldn't handle the fact that the defensive they wanted to match Garrett up in the most favorable situation possible. I think that situation is going to continue this year, where Schwartz is going to move him around to maximize whatever advantage the Browns can get, but I don't think it's going to become an issue with his other defensive linemen. As far as the run defense, it's so hard to know from preseason because everybody plays vanilla. You just don't know until you get out there and you do it. But the guys they brought in on paper, for what that's worth, they're better than what they had. and they have a better system than what they had. So, the linebackers are going to be better if they're playing, with Shelby Harris and, Tomlinson in front of them, eating up space, eating up blockers. It's going to make it easier because, you're not, if I'm JOK, I'm not going to have to fight off a guard, trying to, come in, because he doesn't have to worry about the defensive tackles. He can, so they're going to be a problem, and they're just going to make, it's just all going to stack, and all those pieces are just going to, complementary pieces are all going to work together, in a perfect world.
Talking with Thomas Moore of SB Nation's Dawgs by Nature, previewing this upcoming Week 1 game against the Cleveland Browns. Going back to the offensive side of the ball, the Bengals recently picked up Demetric Felton, who was a running back / wide receiver / do-it-all gadget, whatever, for the Bengals practice squad. But now the Browns still have, obviously, in my lifetime, like the Browns haven't always been good, obviously, but they've had 2 players who I think I just described the same way, like guys who just every single snap, they get done. One of them is Joe Thomas, and one of them is Nick Chubb. I have the ultimate respect for Nick Chubb as a player. I think he's by far the best running back in the league. Behind him, though, there's no longer Kareem Hunt. You have Pierre Strong, who you guys traded for, Jerome Ford, UC Bearcat, love him. He's still behind there. In terms of just managing Chubb throughout the season, is it just like putting 250 carries on him and then just seeing where it goes? Or like, how's this rotation going to be if they want to keep him fresh, or if that's just not even like a problem anymore?
No, I think you're going to still see the rotation. I think, obviously the more they pass, the less, wear and tear they get on, his body. So if the offense if the passing gets clicking, then you don't have to worry about running Chubb as much until the fourth quarter. They really like Jerome Ford. Kareem Hunt is a name that everybody knows, and it was great having him on the team, but his production has been on the decline, the past year and a season and a half. So Ford should hopefully be enough to handle 5 to 10 carries a game. Maybe that's even too much, a couple of series of games just to give Chubb a little bit of a break. But also, Chubb rips off a 50 or 60 yard run, and you only have a 3 or 4 play offensive drive. That takes a lot of wear and tear off of him as well. So it's going to, it'll be situational, it'll be game to game, but I don't really see them over. I'm just going to look up like his stats real quick. Just look at his his usage. So yeah, 302 attempts last year. I would say that's probably a good ballpark to think where he's going to be this year, give or take a few. I just don't really see them overworking him any one particular game, especially early on in the game, because they're going to want him to be fresh in the fourth quarter to really break down, opposing defenses.
We'll get you out of here in just a couple minutes. Couple more questions for you, Tom.
Do I get to ask you guys questions?
if you want, yeah.
So Joe Burrow, what are your guys? One, how comfortable are you that is he going to? Obviously he's going to play on Sunday. How effective is he going to be with this calf injury?
I mean, he's going to play. I think he's going to be fine. Unfortunately, as John and I have moaned about for the past couple of months now, is that, man, we just can't, that guy can't get a normal off season if his life depended on it. And I'll let John chime in a little bit on it too. I am worried a little bit of just a rust standpoint, but he looks, I mean, if you look back at last year and when he came in and played week 1 off of that appendicitis thing, he already looks, and reports and videos and everything kind of corroborate it, but he already looks like he's in a better place, physically and in game shape, all that kind of stuff, than he was last year entering week 1.
Yeah, I would say that if he's out there, he's going to look pretty close to 100%. I think the worry is if something does end up happening. Like I think it was telling him when he said in the press conference that, I have some good days, I have some bad days, and the bad days, some tightness occurs. So I don't think he's like 100% over this right now, but if he's out there, I don't think he's going to try to limit himself. So if all goes to plan, like, he'll look like the normal Joe Burrow, but there's always that, small percentage chance that something could happen. I think that's where maybe the discomfort kind of lies.
And what's the feeling on the contract situation? I mean, we obviously all know something's going to get worked out. I mean, not even the Bengals can screw this up, but, are they going to be able to, a lot of people, like to create this fantasy around players about the hometown discount, and they only want to win, so they're going to take less money to keep a player like a Jamar Chase, to keep a T. Higgins, to keep this offensive core together. Is that realistic, you think, or where do you guys lie in that discussion?
Well, first of all, I think there's a narrative that still exists, and those who have been around the Bengals, watched them, followed them, covered them, anything like that. I mean, this narrative, we've tried to kind of dissolve it, which is this Bengals are cheap, they won't pay all the guys, they don't do that. That has been dispelled, and really this hasn't been just dispelled in their little run of success here with the Joe Burrow era. I mean, you go back to the mid 2000s, they paid a lot of their stars all at the same time. Their offensive stars, Chad, TJ, Hushmanzada, Carson, their tackles. I mean, you could look at that, and often Rudy Johnson, their running back at the time, oftentimes, they were one of, if not the highest paid player at their position, while continuing to pay contracts elsewhere. So I think they can get it done. It's going to be harder and harder because now contracts are way more exorbitant and guaranteed money and all that kind of stuff all plays into it. So, it's a different era, but I think the narrative isn't really accurate of they're not going to be able to keep all of them. But I don't think Joe's going to take this quote hometown discount. I think that he wants to be paid. He wants to be the highest paid guy, but he also wants a commitment from the team that they are going to keep namely his two offensive weapons, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, long-term or as long as they can, to keep this window, this championship run window open. Mm-hmm. And I know John has some other thoughts on that too.
Yeah, right. That's just what it is right now. It's just Burrow saying, hey, I want to get this done, but I want these concessions to be reached. And I think that might take until maybe Saturday night to end up happening. But like Anthony said, he's going to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. I don't think there's going to be a hometown discount. Obviously, it can be structured in a way where he can fit in other cap numbers for his teammates. Maybe part of that is like, hey, I would like it if you pay T. Higgins what he wants before I sign it, but that may not happen either. I think it's going to get done, but yeah, it's not going to be a hometown discount by any means.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't want to come across as a hater. I like watching Burrow play. He's a blast, to watch play. So.
You're not coming. I mean, obviously there was a track record prior to the era that I'm talking about, the mid 2000s, where the Bengals were paying, when they drafted well at that point and drafted their stars well, they were paying them. And that wasn't necessarily the case in that bad run of the 90s. Where, they guys would bail after their first contract or, that sort of thing, or they wouldn't pay them, or, there's some horror stories that came out of that, but that has changed, I think, quite a bit. And the Bengals have really been done a nice 360, in the PR department and their image, as a franchise. And I think at least we from the Bengals side of the fence, looking outward to everyone else, I think we see it. I don't know that everyone else beyond that fence necessarily sees it. I want to ask this. It's a question. This is from Will Lewis. He good fan of the show here. I'm spinning this kind of a little bit into my own question a little bit, because yes, I think Njoku is perhaps the scariest guy on the Browns, just from a matchup standpoint, and the Bengals' inexperience at safety, that sort of thing. But I want to ask not only about Njoku, but Elijah Moore and where he fits in potentially this week for and going forward, really. How's he been looking and how has he been integrating into the offense? He's
going to be an interesting one to watch because they've moved him around and they're not afraid to, they've had him in the backfield sometimes, obviously in the slot, breaking out wide. So Moore's probably, because I was going to ask you, what's one player that no one's talking about on the Bengals that the Browns should be worried about? And my answer to that question coming this way would probably be Elijah Moore. He missed a little bit of time. He got dinged up a little bit in the preseason, so he missed a little bit of time. But they're going to be doing some different things with him, and that's one thing that they're keeping a little bit quiet, obviously. But it's going to be fun to see just what he can do, and if he can go out and change the way people perceived his time to be in the Jets. That he, was a malcontent, that he was this, he was that, and the other. As far as Njoku goes, it's hard. I don't know. I'm somewhat in the minority I see the potential. I see the talent there. I don't always see the production And
match with it.
maybe that's because I'm not looking at the right things. I watch what Travis Kelce does in Kansas City, and there are pro Njoku people in Cleveland that talk about him as if he's Travis Kelce. And I've never seen him take over a game the way that happens. Now, there's a lot of other factors involved with that. He's still, I think this, he came out of college young, so there's still, so I think this is a year where he might actually live up to, and not that he has necessarily lived down to people, the way people perceive him, but I think he might actually this might be a big year for him. And, he could definitely be problematic on a good day.
Yeah, John, Tom had asked us some of the a sleeper player from the Bengals that maybe, not talked about that Browns fans may be interested in. Brian in Iowa took mine right there. Irv Smith is a guy, I think, I kind of had a Twitter exchange with, a good follower of ours, and we follow him back too. But I kind of said, again, as this, maybe this is just my old school mentality, as things maybe ramp up in week one, you try and find your rhythm, you try and find things that work early, and maybe you manage things a little bit more instead of going bombs away right away. I think maybe some short passing or I always call it the chain moving plays to your tight end. And I think Irv Smith may be a factor, at least early in this game. That's a guy I don't think a lot of people are talking about. John, who might be one that Browns fans should be hearing about but aren't?
Yeah, I think just with the Bengals defense and the talk, like a lot of it's been about the safeties and how they're going to look, and how this defense looks beyond just Jesse Bates and Von Bell. And I think Dax Hill's kind of got underrated just throughout that conversation. Obviously, the sample size is extremely small. Browns fans even saw Dax Hill play like emergency snaps at cornerback last year when they were dealing with all those injuries. He's not going to be a boundary cornerback this week. You might see him pretty close to the line of scrimmage, either lining up in the slot. You might see him be in the post safety. You might see him take away half the field. Like, he's going to be used all over the defense, and I think he's ready for it. I think he's ready for this moment, and I don't like the narrative is that there's going to be a huge drop off potentially at safety play. But I think when you have an athlete like Dax Hill who's now comfortable within the scheme and everything, I think he'll perform just fine. I think he might surprise some people.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Tom.
One more question. Do I got time for one more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel now I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling like this is an interrogation instead of a dialogue, and I want it to be a dialogue.
Keep going. Okay. Browns have won 5 in a row at home against the Bengals. They've won 8 out of the last 10 against the Bengals. Yep. What are you guys doing? What's up with that?
I mean, John's the resident smart guy here. I'm just the dope that pretends to know stuff. But I just feel as kind of cliche and as bad of an answer as this may sound, I just feel that personnel wise, they have not matched up well. And maybe that has changed. Maybe that'll change going forward here, because the Bengals continue to make strides in outside free agency and bring in other guys. I think Myles Garrett has just been a factor almost every single time they played in those games. And then Nick Chubb. It's really been Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb. And those two guys are two of the best in the league at their respective positions for a reason. And the Bengals have not found consistent answers in stopping them, and they have really wrecked games. I think John and I talked yesterday. We looked at Nick Chubb's stats, at least as of recently, against the Bengals alone. Last year, the first game, that Halloween game, he ran all over him for 100-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. Second game was finally the first one really in a while. I think he's played, 8 or 9 games against the Bengals, if my memory serves, and really only 2 have been where he's been controlled by the Bengals defense, and everything else has been like outrageous stat-wise. So, I think it's a matchup thing, and I think the Browns stars, their 2 big stars on each side of the ball, have just taken over the game. And for some reason, too, I don't mean to cut into John, for some reason, too, Baker Mayfield had this team's number. He just played like a different guy every single time he went up against the Bengals. And and it always seemed that there was some storyline where he had the chip on his shoulder going into that week. He was going to get benched, or he was going to lose his job, or the Hugh Jackson thing years ago. And he just played with a different kind of passion against the Bengals, and that was a factor too.
Yeah, Baker just plays really well against Ohio teams. We saw that when he played Ohio State back in Oklahoma. Yeah. So maybe that was what it is. But yeah, like you said though, like division teams, like they know each other very well. I think I always look to the NFC West. They always have some wacky games where even some the clear underdogs in those games end up like giving like the 49ers or whoever's at the top, the business or whatnot. That's the AFC North is tough, man. For as long as I've been alive, like the Browns and Bengals never really been that much better than the other. Like they've always played each other pretty closely, and the Browns have talent. Like the talent has not necessarily been an issue with the Browns over the past 4 years for the majority of the roster. Obviously, there's some deficiencies that has kept them back a little bit, but when you have teams who play them, for the first time in a couple of years, they may take advantage of some coaching, maleficence or whatever. But no, when the Browns have 2 games against the Bengals every year, there's plenty of tape on them. Like Anthony said, like they just found what works against them, and they've just kind of taken advantage of that. And the Bengals have just yet to answer in a consistent way. So that's going to be a goal for them this year.
Yeah, and I mean, as with any big rivalry, there's ebbs and flows to it. I mean, I talked about that mid-2000s team, the Marvin Lewis teams. I mean, that was a dominant run for the Bengals against the Cleveland Browns when the Browns couldn't figure out their quarterback position and all kinds of different things. I mean, the Browns only won a small handful of games over the course of many years, and now that has flipped, which is surprising because this Bengals team seems to be, much stronger across the board than some of the other ones that Marvin Lewis fielded and was getting those wins. So it's a little surprising, but I mean, this is also, we talked about this last night on our show too. This is also why I think this is a very important game to the Bengals. Not just because it's starting, it's a week 1 game, it's a division game, but it's also this, if you lose another one here, I don't know if this starts to get, I mean, this is a mentally tough Bengals team, but I don't know if it starts to get into your psyche a little bit. Like, man, this is just that one team we can't seem to consistently beat. And, I think that's why it's important. So with that, Tom, I will say, go ahead.
One thing on the, to kind of like tie into all that, both, Cincinnati and, Cleveland, they both start the season with back-to-back division games. So whoever loses on Sunday, all of a sudden you're looking at you're facing down a week 2 that if you lose, not only you're 0-2, you're 0-2 in the division. And, the good part is if you come through those, you're all of a sudden, it's like, wow, not only am I 2-0, I'm 2-0 in the division. And, you're not necessarily going to win or lose the division the first couple of weeks, but those 2 opening games, and the Browns have 3 of their first 4 in the division. They play, everybody, they play Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and then week 4, they play Baltimore. So in their first 4 games, they already got 3 division games out of the way. And that's, you got to come out of the gate firing. And, Cincinnati's in a similar situation with the Browns and Baltimore back to back.
Yeah, and both teams have it's flipped, but they have a road game and a home game in those division games. So one apiece there. Well, this is a good segue as we start to kind of wrap things up. I'm glad you asked us questions. A lot of our guests, I feel like we pepper them with questions and we don't give them the opportunity to ask us questions. So we like that. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Good. Hey, you open the door. I'm taking it.
Yeah. Well, that being said, kind of how do you see this one playing out? What do you the line right now I think is Bengals favored by 2.5 by DraftKings there. So how do you see that one playing out, and what are you thinking about this one?
I think for this is going to be it's interesting. And I should look this up because I just wrote it about a week ago. The last time the Browns won the first game of the season in consecutive years was 90. It was either 92 and 93 or 93 and 94. And both years it was against the Bengals. They finally won week 1 last year. This is the chance to do that for the first time since the early 90s to win their opening game back-to-back seasons. Like we said, 5 in a row at home, 8 out of 10 against the Bengals. I have no reason to believe that it's not going to be, by 4:05 on Sunday, it's not going to be 6 in a row at home and 9 out of the past 11. Everybody's going to be scratching their head like, what the heck did we do wrong? But going to go Browns 31-24.
31-24. Okay. So a touchdown victory for the Browns. Well, this is
all the points.
Yeah, a lot of points.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Hey, I mean, stranger things have happened. I mean, we could see either a struggle, like we said, because it is week 1 and week 1's weird, or with these 2 quarterbacks and the weapons that they have, we could see a lot of points scored. That's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. Again, Tom, where can people find you, find your work, everything you got going on at Dawgs by Nature?
Sure. Just go to It's embarrassing. I just didn't want. I wanted to say go to dogsbynature.com. I didn't want to say like .org or something stupid. And then if for some reason you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Tom_RedRight88 at on the Twitter X, the X Twitter, whatever we want to call it nowadays. If anybody's still around, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one there.
Well, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for your insight. I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting one, and hopefully we catch up maybe at the rematch or something down the road.
Anytime you guys want me, I'm here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for your time, and we will we'll see what happens this week. Appreciate it, Tom.
All right, no problem. Go Browns.
All right, take care. That was Tom Moore. Great guy. We haven't had him on before. That was a lot of fun talking to him and getting questions back. I like that. But we are going to get on out of here. We have a show tomorrow where we're going to run through some headlines and that sort of stuff. And then John and I have been talking. We're going to kind of, yet again, I know our listeners are going to hate us, but we're going to switch around the schedule a little bit, but we're for the following week. But it's going to be back a little bit to what we did last year, where we're going to have the post-game report on Sunday. We're going to do a little bit of a breakdown of the game and everything Monday, John and myself. And then we'll do our Thursday show. And then Fridays we'll do like news and notes and or listener questions live. So we'll do all kinds of different stuff. We've got a lot of shows to pepper you with. And I keep asking more and more of John. I'm sorry, buddy.
It's not like it's my job or anything.
Hey, don't. It's not a job. It's a passion project, right?
It doesn't feel like a job. I'm in my apartment talking on a computer,
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you. Thanks to Tom, John. Thank you, bud. And we will we'll catch up soon, and hopefully we'll be talking about a Bengals win.
Yeah, talk to you guys soon.